Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. Hope you're having a phenomenal day. Holy cow, we got a pretty big one here today where specific support and resistance ranges and the expectation of the price pulling back on the short term. We have talked about that previously, but I want to reiterate how important that is, as well as Bitcoin dominance increasing with stablecoin, of course, pulling back. So it's kind of some early signs of weakness. It's a low volume weekend though, folks. Pretty much the same scenario here in that sense, but there's some important things to recognize with taking short positions versus longs. We're kind of waiting to take some longs, but also have a short position open with AVAX. We're halfway to our target already, and we're going to maintain some good composure here today and make sure we look at some liquidation levels, specifically the lower time frame liquidation, so we know kind of what's next. There's a solid chance we're going to see that next level here. Be sure to stick around. We got a good one today. Let's take a look. All right, folks, before we jump into the charts here and or look at the back-end data here, I just want to quickly ask you to hit the like button, comment below, show your support by doing that every single time you watch. Really appreciate that. Thank you again so much. Now, before we get into kind of the nitty-gritty, I want to kind of just touch on the market as a whole. So if we look at the last 3 trading days, we've seen altcoins specifically start to plateau out and pull back. This is basically reflected on the bottom right here with altcoin dominance coming down. We can see a slight increase for stablecoin. Most money's flowing into Bitcoin right now. Even though technically, Bitcoin's pulling back by a little bit, we can see most altcoins, specifically Ethereum dominance, is starting to pull back a lot harder. So it does tell us that trading altcoins today isn't necessarily the best call. If you want to, maybe consider joining our trading community, you'll know that we are short on AVAX and considering a few long positions at specific key levels we're going to identify today. So make sure you understand that we're in a position right now where the price action should continue to progress lower over the weekend. It's very common for holiday weekends to be red. It's kind of the par of the course this year, and we just want to be mindful that taking along just yet at this exact moment probably not the best idea. Okay. All that being said, we're going to identify those key levels on Bitcoin and some specific altcoins. But more importantly, here we can see 88,000 is that lowest area of buy order. So that's a heavily guarded range. We've talked about this previously. 88,000 is that lower range. I would love to see 88K so we can consider a long position there. Okay. So that's kind of like the heaviest buy order here outside of 90,000 locally, right? Which could actually happen here soon. Now taking a look at liquidation. This is what kind of concerns me for the weekend here. The last 7 days worth of longs, there's a lot of idiots out there still holding long positions open, and they are essentially going to be liquidated here soon. Not to say it's a guarantee, and you're not an idiot. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. If you are in a long position, it's just that in general, if you are getting greedy and you got in at 85, 88,000, and you're in a long right now, and you're just holding on for dear life to try to hold this out until next year sometime, you're doing it wrong. I'm not referring to spot bags. I'm referring to leverage. Okay, so if you use any form of leverage, take profits while you can. This market is extremely tumultuous, and it's important to do that. So anyways, all that said, 90 to 88,500 is a significant chunk of liquidation in the last 7 days to the downside. 24-hour liquidation's fairly close, about 89.7 as the highest point to the downside, and roughly 91.5 to the up. Okay, so those are kind of just the things to be mindful of there. Now let's jump in the back end here, kind of get just a different perspective on things. We look at open interest on the far right-hand side. We've discussed this previously, but 91.8, round number 92,000 is that heavy amount of resistance based not only on open interest, but our previous high range. We still have yet to close above 92K, and it's important to note that that is a tentative resistance, just like 88,000 is our tentative support. Okay, and I emphasize the word tentative because they're working. It's always a work in progress, right? Having said that, though, liquidation delta is still high to the upside, basically implying we have more longs than shorts, which is both good and bad. This much liquidation leading into a weekend can oftentimes, signal like a very strong reversal, or at the very least, a low volume reversal, which weekends are common for that, right? Commonplace. Anyways, the last 30 days worth of liquidation, there is still that 95K area to the upside. So I still feel on this uptrend here, we're still more likely to see 95,000 before we are to see, 80,000, for example. I know it's obviously a lot closer, but the concept here is that further upside makes sense with the exception of potential downside here on the short term. Let's go ahead and look at this here. This is the last 7 days worth of liquidation. You can see a lot of liquidation is right here between 90 and 89K, and then a semi-large chunk around 88,000. So 89K to 88,000 seems like a very solid consideration for an average entry on a long position, obviously depending on how the market is at that time. All right, we always want to reevaluate. But when we look at the charts here, this is kind of giving us indication that we have a good solid support range below the price, once again, our local lows and our local highs, those still have yet to be retested. Those are common areas of retracement. Okay, so these are the kind of areas we want to pay attention to for long considerations or take profit targets on a short. It's not a guarantee we're coming down to that level, but we got a fair value gap below the price, volume starting to dry up. There's a lot of profits on the board. I mean, it just kind of makes sense that the price is going to pull back. Okay. Now we'll take a look at some fair value gaps, sorry, CME gaps tomorrow once we get a little closer to the weekend. In fact, I'll post that on our social media. Future reference too, if you have access to Twitter, Telegram, or Discord, I highly recommend you use our links below to register, or more so just to access that, because it's really good content here. And I want to say thanks again for all the wonderful comments and feedback too. It's really cool to be able to get that from you. All right, so let's take a look here, of course, at some data here on the daily time frame. Just kind of round this out because I want to kind of drive something home here, which is just basically the macro structure. Let's start with the 3-day time frame actually, and just kind of recognize we have some support below the price. So if we get rid of these little fib levels here locally, we can see there's a lot of confluence at 78,000 and that 0.5 fib level at 88,000. Okay, so that's also an area of confluence, right? We want to make sure we use that because there's not only the 200-day SMA, but there's also the 0.5 fib level at that level. All right, so it kind of lets us know from a macro perspective, support at 88,000 is a very logical place to consider averaging into your long position if you're going to take one. Not to say we can't still go down. It's just that's kind of an area of consistency. All right, now from a larger time frame too, we can also see we're seeing a stochastic swing to the upside here as well. That initial momentum where we're bottomed out. We've been moving in for 27 days in the same direction. Right, we're at basically a 9 on TD sequential here. So is that breaking point, that shift in momentum? So we're more likely to do that, but I just wouldn't expect that to happen on the weekend. All right, so I think next week we should see some green, of course, with the exception of an initial short-term correction over this weekend here. That's kind of my thoughts. But that's kind of where out there overall. Nothing too crazy or outrageous here. Honestly, there's no like hidden divergences or the one indicator to rule them all. You're going to get people saying that. But for the most part, it's just kind of standard trading on the weekends, low volume sell-off after a profitable weekday. It just makes a lot more sense to, again, consider shorting, right? We shorted AVAX from 1484 to 1455, just on a safer 10x leverage trade. And if you're not already familiar, I always talk about these things. I always explain why we're taking the trades. It's all available in our trade alert section within our Discord and Telegram, right? So that's available there for our premium members. Other than that, I hope you have a good rest of your day. We'll go ahead and take a look at some altcoins here next. Thanks again for your time. All right, folks, jumping on into the Ethereum charts. Right here at that $3,000 range, we can see our previous high at roughly $2,960 is looking to be retested here shortly. That's generally a good place for capitulation or the price to bounce and recover. Keep in mind there's a little bit more fair value below the price as well, and there's a decent chance Bitcoin continues a bit lower. So I would be very careful just jumping right into this level, but this is generally an area of confirmation, kind of letting us know that we should experience some kind of support. Usually previous highs work as new lows in that regard. Let's take a quick look here at Ethereum on the right-hand side and just kind of compare it with Bitcoin. It's running fairly synonymous with Bitcoin, just pulling back a little harder here once we lost this shelf of 3,000. So now that we've lost 3,000, solid chance we do progress lower from a lower time frame perspective there, just based on how relative it is to Bitcoin, more so 2x to the downside, and that's generally not a favorable sign. Let's go ahead and get a refresh here and take a look at our Ethereum backend data. I'll just quickly note some important stuff here. Sorry, let's pull out the right chart here. Let's get our primary chart first, and just kind of recognize what was it. It was, I think it was 2880, close approximate 2900 is that local area of support based on open interest, as well as 2950. So kind of every $50, we're seeing some support below the price. So we can presume we're going to see some slowing pressure soon if Bitcoin starts to stall out and not pull back. But I can tell you what, folks, this 2900 is probably a distinct probability at this point, just based on the simple fact that I feel like we're going to see that 89 to 90K range for Bitcoin. We're already knocking on 90K range right now. So in that case, what we can see here, liquidation delta is tapering off. It's approaching break even. I think it may even be at break even, if I see that correctly. Is definitely in a position right now where we're hitting that neutral state. Right. Usually when you see that transition from bullish to bearish, you're going to see liquidation kind of shift gears. In other words, more shorts than longs are entering the market. And unless there's some type of manipulation, which is totally potential reality for us, that we should experience further downside. Well, there's 2930 and then 2850 as those next areas of liquidation. Okay. So ETH is not in a great position right now. We don't necessarily need to look too hard into the macro. We have broken our short-term descending trend line, but we're still under the 20-day SMA. I really don't see that as a very strong positive contributing factor. We can also see our 50 and the 200 SMA kind of working their way down. That's somewhat of a death cross. It doesn't mean the price is going to drop instantly. It just suggests that's going to be a strong resistance if we get there. Okay, so please understand we got a pretty significant bearish type of divergence for Ethereum. Money flow index is increasing, which is somewhat favorable, and we once again have broken our short-term descending trend, maintaining above our macro structure of 2750 for our point of control there, or more importantly, sorry, that is well, it's somewhat of our local point of control, but it's also our 0.618 fib level. So I do think it's going to take a pretty significant correction from Bitcoin to get any lower than 25 to 2700 for ETH. But do I think those are distinct probabilities here in the immediate future? Not exactly. I think this weekend we're going to see a bleed out, but I don't think it's going to be monumental unless Bitcoin starts to run. So those are my thoughts on Ethereum. What are yours? Comment below. Quick heads up to our traders. We got a 15% discount on trading fees if you use my link to register through Bitunix. Links down below in the description. All right, folks, take a quick look here at Solana, see kind of where we're at here. This coin is underperforming here recently. We've lost our ascending trend line there too, also considered to be a bearish type of sign, and there's still more fair value below the price, right? So these are all signs kind of letting us know that we're not in phenomenal shape for this coin, and it's absolutely something you want to be careful trading right now to the upside. Don't just buy the dip because it's a dip. I think that we could see further downside just based on what we're seeing here. Now, let's quickly look at the side-by-side. We can kind of recognize that while Bitcoin hasn't broken its ascending trend. Obviously, it depends on how you draw it out, but for the most part, it's getting close, but isn't quite there yet. We're in a situation where Solana is absolutely shifted bearish here, right? So this coin is not a good coin to try to trade to the upside. Is it too late to short? Not really, just based on the simple fact that we can see Bitcoin pulling back and the likelihood of Bitcoin going lower is higher. And we're already seeing a almost 3x correction for Solana to the downside. So those aren't coins I generally like to trade, at least trade into. What I prefer to trade into would be a area of support, right? 128 to 132. That's somewhat in that range of support that I kind of identified within our community here recently. In fact, let's quickly pull that up. I mentioned yesterday that Solana, we're looking for longs at 132 to 135, ETH respectively 2900 to 2960, and of course, 88.5, 88.7K for Bitcoin. So that's all provided in my community, of course, but I'd like to give you heads up on coins that I'm planning to take trades with, just so you can kind of see where I'm planning to get into. Those are not exact levels, folks, but we're kind of now entering that very high range of potential support for Solana. That's exactly why I'm considering, or at least had considered yesterday, between 132 and 135 for that potential long. And once more, if we take a look at liquidation, though, it's shifting bearish, right? So we do got to be careful just buying a dip to buy a dip. That's not really the greatest call. Probably better off waiting for this liquidation between 132 and 135 to be hit first. It's okay, so those lower areas first. There's a little chunk there at 128, so kind of to reevaluate that analysis from yesterday, I would say 128 to 132 makes a little bit more sense at this point for a potential area of consideration for a long. But maybe if you really insist, you could start to average in soon here, but there's still a lot of meat left on the bone, right? That's just basically what the back-end data is telling us. Looking at the daily time frame here, this is one of the few coins that's really close to breaking out, but it keeps maintaining below its 20-day SMA. So we're not in a bullish type of structure at all. Even if we get above that, we're still way bearish. But for the most part, that's a good starting point to be maintaining above that level and to break our local high structure. We still have yet to do that because once again, we haven't closed above on the 4-hour time frame, 144 yet. Right? Ever since we've been below it on the November 14th, it's been about two weeks ago, we've been stuck under 144. Okay, so until we close above that level, there's no reason to consider taking a long with extreme confidence, right? And what I mean by extreme confidence, just it's going to be a long where you can maybe set it and perhaps consider forgetting it. But right now, you still got to worry about this range that we're in. We're still stuck in a range. So, if we start to retest this lower area of the range, 128 to just say 122, that would be a good consideration for a long because it'll likely continue to recover to its local high. All right, so we're kind of in range-bound trading territory right now for this coin. So that is something you want to be mindful of if you're going to consider any type of trades with Solana for the moment. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know. All right, folks, jumping on over to SUI. This coin is one coin that I was considering a short with, but didn't pull the trigger just because, honestly, I hate shorting this coin. It's a simple way to understand it, but it did have that rising wedge pattern here that is inevitably a bearish sign that generally breaks to the downside. Obviously, a descending trend line to rejection as well. So there's a lot of reasons why the price for SUI is pulling back right now. It isn't just because Bitcoin's pulling back. It was massively overextended here and has a lot of fair value to be filled yet, right? So once more, I'm sticking to my thought process of, 140? Yeah, 140 to 146 for SUI as a consideration for a long, right? Once more, consideration is the emphasis, folks. Some people see the fact that I say that I'm interested in those areas, and they just take along blindly because of it. Things can change a lot between now and the time that it actually happens, right? So make sure you always double check. But we look at the comparison here. It's moving synonymous in a lot of ways with Bitcoin and its range. So it's nothing like super outrageous. I don't think we're going to see SUI, go too much lower than its local low. But for the most part, outside of this one outlier here, it's not really looking phenomenal. Okay, backend data kind of tells us here that 150 to 160 is kind of that resistance range for us. So we lose that or close below it, then we're probably going to see the 140 to 150s, right? It's kind of working itself into that lower channel. All that said, though, liquidation delta is still slightly bullish, which is kind of surprising. But there's too much liquidation on the downside to feel confident in taking a long. Once 140s hit, maybe, but I would even feel better about 130 at this point. Obviously, beggars can't be choosy, as you've heard, maybe perhaps the analogy there, but generally speaking, at this point, there's too much liquidation close by, and I don't really like when it's like that, especially that in combination with Bitcoin not really looking super strong this weekend. So SUI does not have my vote for a long. I would much rather wait once again for that 140, 145, and let's reevaluate Bitcoin at that time and see kind of what it looks like. Once more, this fair value gap as low as 140 seems like a distinct probability. Okay, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Friendly reminder to our traders, we got a 15% trading discount using my link below to register for Bitunix. You'll also automatically be eligible for future trading competitions through this exchange. It's an excellent exchange. There's no KYC required. Be sure to use my link down below to register. All right, folks, taking a quick look here at XRP. It's still maintaining its current range here. Let's double check the lower time frames, but generally speaking, it's been pretty well performing within a range of 217 to 225. Okay, so it's kind of a loose estimate there, but this is generally a bullish type of structure just based on how well the price has been maintaining within this range. So more likely to break up than down, but we also want to look at some backend data and see if that's a possibility for us. Because once more, it's a weekend, folks. There's not like a lot of amazing type of trading conditions right now. Price action is pretty flat outside of, again, shorts if you're into that kind of thing, right? Now taking a look here, of course, at 205 to 207, we can see that lower area of support based on liquidation. And of course, the macro structure kind of lets us know a little bit more recently here, 215 to 225 is that current range. So until we break that range, we got to presume it continues. That's generally how ranges work. And for the most part, liquidation delta is still bearish, which it has been majority of the entire week, which is interesting because there's a lot of people trying to short this coin, but it doesn't seem to want to break down. So that does lead me to believe that there's good strength here in this coin. There's more likelihood of further upside, but that really just depends on Bitcoin. Okay, what I mean by that is if we see here 215 to 210 is that lower range of support based on the liquidation range there, which once again, liquidation accumulates at support ranges. We can see that if the price were to come down there, that would be a much better consideration for a long. But once more, we'd break that structure, we'd invalidate that potential bullish flag pattern. So generally when you see these kind of structures here, as soon as we break this pattern here, then it becomes kind of invalidated, right? That's why I provide invalidation levels with all of my trades rather. And the whole concept is to ensure that you know where to cut your losses. So if I wasn't going to take a long at 217, I would make sure that the invalidation is a closure below 217 on the 4-hour time frame, because you can see on the 4-hour here, it has yet to close below that level, right? Anyways, that's just kind of some food for thought there. It's not specifically how you're going to want to trade this coin right now. Me personally, unless you're going to be trading in this range, there's no real point in trading this coin. As simple as that. But let's double check the daily time frame just to kind of make sure, because I just need to reiterate and reaffirm this. Some people get kind of stuck on lower time frames and they forget to zoom out, that we're still in a descending trend. We haven't broken bullish. We're maintaining right here at our point of control at 220. That's essentially the support and resistance zone for us. Okay, so until we establish a breakout above or below this range, it's difficult to want to take a trade. And even then, when we have a breakout, we want to know what direction Bitcoin's heading to. So I think the easy way to understand is you're probably safer considering a long versus a short on this coin. It has more bullish type of signs, more things that are kind of confirming that we're more likely to go higher. But there's no doubt that we're still in a descending trend. And if you are trying to trade this coin to the metaphorical moon, you're totally doing it wrong. At least that's probably what majority of social media is doing right now, I'm sure. I haven't seen any of those posts in a while, thank God, because I consistently try to mute them. But I can tell you what, those XRP enthusiasts are something else. They're just getting people destroyed left and right. Anyways, all that being said, no one's perfect, but right now, you're probably better off outside of this range, waiting for the range to be broken, and to kind of go from there. It's simple as that. Generally speaking, I prefer not to trade coins that are behaving like this, even though we have some slightly bullish signs. Bitcoin is proven to be fairly well bearish right now. So still kind of considered to be high risk to trade this coin. All right, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know. Comment below. I look forward to seeing the next one. Take care.